Got it.
The screen is starting to look like my stamp album.
Yes. Well, I call this usually, the popcorn effect, when everybody tries to jump on at exactly the time the meeting is supposed to start, and you've got those little faces coming in. But I try to, whenever I am personally sending out Zoom invitations, I put in red letters on the invitation, sign in beforehand, because the meeting starts promptly at 1, and it is 1 o'clock. And so I am going to be starting the meeting right now. So welcome, everybody. I'm so glad that you took time out of this wonderful sunny, not sunny, but warm afternoon to join us. I know this is a topic of a lot of interest to people. We are going to be learning about how smaller budget villages serve their communities while charging no or low fees, $50 or less. How can they thrive on small budgets? Well, our 3 speakers are going to describe how their villages have made do with less, but without sacrificing services or programs. They're going to talk about the challenges and the solutions, and especially the rewards. So the session is being recorded, and the video and materials from the speakers will be posted on our website. And you'd look up at the top, you'd look at WAVE programs, and then scroll down and see archive of WAVE events. It may be sometime next week before everything is up, but we will be posting it, so you'll have it there. I'll ask everybody to mute themselves. And we decided to hold questions at the end, and you can put them in the chat as we go along. But it may well be that as a successive presenter, takes their turn to talk about their village, that either they already answer your question, or that they cause you to decide that you wanted to reframe it anyway. Again, you can feel free certainly to put your questions in the chat, but we're really not going to get to any of them until after everybody has spoken. I wanted to remind you of upcoming WAVE events. On April 19th is our quarterly meeting, which is a longer program, as you know, with a plenary and breakouts. And it's going to focus on an equally interesting topic of villages that are intergenerational or multi-generational. And some of our speakers today have both. But there's a lot of interest in how we can include different generations of people, both in our service aspects and in our program aspects. So you'll be hearing about that. And also you'll learn who was the winner of the Founders Award. Then again, there will be 2 follow-up programs by Chris Palmer on his very popular workshops on preparing programs on aging, dying, and death. And those will be May 4th and June 8th. I encourage everybody to just look at our homepage, look at that calendar, scroll through the rich list of events that are on there, and go ahead and sign up. And as a reminder, you do not need to log in to sign up on any of the events that you see on that calendar for now. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce all 3 speakers at the same time now, so that, again, we can just go with the flow when they start presenting. And the order that we're going to go in is Abby Sims will go first, George Smith will go second, and Joe Isaacs will go third. And that's simply in the alphabetical order of their first names. So Abby Smith is the co-founder and president of North Chevy Chase Connections. Professionally, she's a lawyer, and she retired after a 40-year career with the NLRB. And she was chief of something that sounds very scary, the Contempt, Compliance, and Special Litigation Branch. It sounds like she got all the really nice people to work with, doesn't it, right? And during her career, she also held leadership positions in Hadassah, which advocates for women's health issues in the U.S. And she spearheaded an effort to create the nationally recognized Early Childhood Center. She is proud to say that she's been happily married for 50 years and has 3 grown children. Thank you, Abby. George Smith is the founder of Wingate Neighbors Helping Neighbors Village and shepherded its growth and integration with Maplewood Village. He initiated it while he was president of his community citizen association. He credits a resident, Isabel Schoenfeld, who was then on the County Commission on Aging, with introducing him to the village concept. He served as its first president for many years, and then after a hiatus, he returned again to lead Wingate and Maplewood Neighbors Helping Neighbors. George says he benefited from the advice of other villages along the way and is really happy to be able to give back this afternoon. Joe Isaacs is the president of Mill Creek Village. He and I go way back to the 1990s due to a shared interest in promoting patient engagement in their health and care, going back to the 1990s when he was the president of the National Health Council. And he has a long and deep experience in nonprofit organizations and civic activity. And he's a fellow of the American Society of Association Executives. He's won several awards for outstanding leadership and volunteer contributions from the district, Prince George's, and Maryland. He joined Mill Creek in 2017 and has served in several executive roles. And he's been president for the last 4 years. He says his village takes great pride in how they have persevered and developed since its founding without dues or fees for their services. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Abby, and welcome, Abby, and thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to be here to share the experiences of North Chevy Chase Connections. I think I'd like to start with our mission statement, and that is that we are an all-volunteer nonprofit building a strong multi-generational community where neighbors get to know and help each other. We began organizing in 2015, and it took a couple of years. We launched services in 2018. And our area we have about 2,000 homes, and the area is actually inside Rock Creek. To the north, it's our boundary is the Beltway. To the south, it's East-West Highway. To the west, it's Rock Creek Park, and to the west, it's Connecticut Avenue, although we include some of the communities that would otherwise be orphaned, like behind Einstein Bagels and up to Hawkins Lane. And on the east, it's Rock Creek Park. So we have about 2,000 households that would be eligible to be part of our village. And I think in that level, we're probably one of the smaller areas geographically. So we hold monthly programming in person and on Zoom. We have social events, both small and large. We have seasonal activities such as an enormous neighborhood-wide Halloween parade and block party, and concerts, outdoor concerts on the grounds of the local church. And I will be talking about partnerships and how we're able to operate with low dues structure. We charge $50 per household per year. And that includes everybody who is in that household. We have another level of giving, and that is $100 for a sustaining membership. And basically that is just giving us an extra $50 donation. It doesn't really give you any additional services. It just gives us a big, we just give you a big thank you for that. And interestingly, we've just recently, actually at the last board meeting, added a third category because we've begun to get people who do not live within our geographic area who are interested in joining, just to acknowledge that they appreciate our activities. And so we've created a category, Friends of NCCC, and we are charging $25 for that category. They will not be entitled to services. They will not be entitled to join our listserv, which is just limited to those within our geographic area. But we did want to provide an opportunity for those who want to be connected to us in some way to have that kind of a membership. So budgetarily, I'm going to talk about where we were at the end of 2022. Our budget is our costs, our expenses are approximately $7,000 a year. That includes insurance, because I know some villages might feel comfortable operating without board of directors and officers insurance, but as a lawyer, and as someone who's been active in nonprofit organizations my whole life, there is no way that I could ask other people to volunteer and be involved without having that kind of insurance. So that is quite expensive. It's close to $2,000 a year. Marketing communication costs have really gone up. I'll talk a little about how we started using mostly free, but now when you reach a certain point in your village, and if you want to be able to function efficiently using technology, you generally have to upgrade your services to a more premium package. So we pay for the GoDaddy domain names, the website, MailChimp, Constant Contact, Zoom, postage. We also recently, and I believe this was based on my treasurer's attendance at one of the WAVE events, realizing that she has all of her stuff on her computer. And there was a village where the treasurer somehow was no longer available. They couldn't access the material and it was a disaster. So we have hired a consultant and we moved everything online through QuickBooks. The consultant costs money, obviously. Wave dues, we give a welcome bag. So we purchase beautiful bags that we give to new neighbors, and we do volunteer background checks. So all of that adds up to about $7,000 a year. Including, well, I didn't mention the social events obviously cost money. The outdoor concert where we provide free refreshments. We have we've done this, I think 3 times now. We have 100 to 150 neighbors come and hang out on the grounds of the church, and we have local musicians who do that. We provide some subsidies to our interest groups, and among the interest groups, we have an artist group, a gardening group, a golf interest group, an environmental footprint forum, kids and family group, a lunch bunch, and a walking group. And pre-pandemic, people were meeting more regularly in person, and we were subsidizing the cost of refreshments so that people, because everybody likes to eat, and if they know there are refreshments, they're going to come. We also have, we've had a winter holiday party pre-pandemic, volunteer appreciation events, and our income from dues is approximately $10,000. So as you can see, we operate within our budget, and we actually have excess every year. So what we do with that money is we put that money in a reserve fund because, well, I'll get to that in a minute. But at the end of 2022, we had 140 households with about 2/3 paying the $50 as general members and about 1/3 paying $100 as sustaining members. So what I think you'd be most interested in, I was told to talk about the village. So now I'm kind of done with that, but it'll come up again. 2 critical components in creating the infrastructure of a low or no cost village: utilization of free resources and tapping into volunteer skill sets. So our resources, we have a partnership with the local church. Initially, when we met with the Reverend, they were incredibly generous and charged us nothing for the meeting rooms. And you know how hard it is when you start out. You want to have a place in the neighborhood where you can meet that's comfortable and easy to access. And so we were incredibly grateful to have that. Once we launched and we were getting dues, we started paying a very reduced rate. I think it was $30 for each meeting room assignment. Montgomery County is incredible. Pazit, as you all know, is just amazing. We would not be where we are today without her holding our hands. While my co-founder, Mary Margaret Patterson, and I basically paid for everything out of our pocket, all of the costs of becoming incorporated, getting the IRS certification, all of the different costs we paid. And then Montgomery County reimbursed us. So we didn't have to actually pay for those things ultimately out of our pocket. We used Wix, which at that point was a free website. That is one of the services that we've upgraded because we have so many more communications. And I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but the services themselves have cut back on how many emails you can send out in a month. So you have to upgrade if you want to continue communicating with as many people. We currently have 700 distinct email addresses on our email list, where we send out a digest monthly and with reminders of all of our activities. And we have about 300 on our private listserv. The other great free service is Google Voice. We have a free phone number with voicemail. The only thing is you have to use it, because I get notices. I had not been in the habit of making calls on the Google Voice. I was receiving calls, but not making them. And unless you make the calls, they say they're going to reassign the number. And since that number is on every single marketing thing that we've got, I make sure that I make those phone calls. We also have a memorandum of understanding with Village Rides. If you don't know what that program is, it is a subsidiary of the Jewish Council for the Aging. It has a contract with the U.S. Department of Transportation. And as a result, we are able to get a tremendous amount of help in terms of software for our transportation services, where and we don't have to pay for that at all. Everything is free when we get it through Village Rides. They've given us an incredible number of marketing materials, and they work with you to design them. I mean, it's been a wonderful, wonderful partnership. And I don't think we'd be where we are now if we didn't have access to their support and services. We have a P.O. box, relatively inexpensive, at the local post office. So that is our mailing address. We chose not to use one of our personal addresses as a mailing address. We wanted to have that separate. And we also have a partnership with Nature Forward, which was formerly the Audubon Naturalist Society. Pre-pandemic, they provided us the gorgeous space. If you haven't been there in their tent, it's so elegant, where we were able to have spring socials over 3 or 4 years. Once the pandemic happened, we kind of switched, and we weren't doing those. So they have been offering us free tours that they charge quite a bit of money for. But because we are the neighborhood village, we have this special relationship with them. And again, another wonderful way to provide to connect them to the neighborhood, and for our members and attendees to be able to use that facility.
Abby, will you be wrapping up soon?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Okay, so I would just say, in terms of volunteer skill sets, we informally surveyed our volunteers. We have a nonprofit lawyer who helped us with all of the incorporation stuff and our taxes and everything else. We had a tech person who created the website, set up our Google Voice phone number, a bookkeeper who does our financial records, et cetera. That's a wonderful resource. Our challenges: leadership succession. I do this job without pay, 15 to 20 hours a week. And that's why we have a reserve, because I think at some point we're going to have to at least hire a part-time helper, but not yet. And our area is undergoing dramatic increase in population. So we are approaching that as well. And thanks for listening. I'm done.
Well, good. Well, and I had told the speakers to try and limit their remarks at the beginning, because I know that your questions will bring out a lot of other details, and we want to make sure that we have time for that. So thank you very much. That was a very rich presentation. Let's see. George Smith, you're going to go next from Wingate and Maplewood Neighbor.
And let me just say one thing I didn't say.
Sure.
I want to thank George and all of the other established villages when we first started that provided incredible support to us. And that is why I'm here. And I think you couldn't find a greater group of people, more competent, more professional, more caring than the people involved with the village. So thanks.
Well, thank you, Abby. That's a nice segue. So yeah, we're a grassroots, no-fee village that serves 2,400 households just inside the Beltway near NIH. We are 8 years old with 64 volunteers and governed by a steering committee of 14 with a board, no paid staff. We're all volunteers, and we're 501c3 certified. We're not a membership organization. We provide, I guess we refer to it as neighborly assistance and social activity to all adults in the community without charge. And this includes sort of the standard set of services, assistance that's occasional, non-emergency, doesn't require a professional license, and doesn't take jobs away from teenagers. Rides, lots of rides, primarily to medical appointments, help with computer and simple household tasks. And on the social interaction side, we provide administrative support to a number of shared interest groups like book clubs and walking groups and others. And occasionally we organize and host community-wide presentations and events. So we adopted this model because most of our organizing committee's members were retired and weren't looking for another job or a village model that would be burdensome, stressful to manage, or have deadlines. So we reasoned that a simple village would be easier to pass on to the next generation and help it survive in the long run. We decided to be no fee, reasoning that this would generate requests for assistance from neighbors in need who would be discouraged by a membership fee. And while we serve a upper middle class neighborhood, we do have elderly long-term residents who I think watch their savings when they request rides. Another factor in how we set up is that we didn't want to be obligated to provide assistance when volunteers were unable to help. We tell our requesters that we can't guarantee a volunteer will be available to provide assistance. So yeah, to have a plan B in place. And we didn't want to feel obligated to provide a steady stream of homegrown initiatives and social presentations and events. So yeah, they are occasional. And then finally, we reasoned that minimizing operating costs would enable us to sustain the village, regardless of the gifts or grants that we might or might not receive, and spare us from the time, energy, and anxiety of fundraising and keeping track of individuals' memberships. So I look forward to sharing how we've managed with all this. And I want to note, repeat that Mary Jo is going to post on the WAVE website my handout, which has a lot of the details of how we've managed to operate on a shoestring budget. So with that, I'll turn it over to Joe.
Well, thank you. You were certainly very brief. And I can tell you, he has about a 6 or 7 page handout. It does have a lot of details in it. If it were already posted, which it isn't, I could send you a link. But again, it certainly will be on our website along with the video for this program. Okay, Joe, take it away, please.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate Abby's and George's comments because we have a lot of similarities in terms of finding anything as cheaply as possible to be able to operate. Mill Creek Village was founded in 2013 to serve the residents in a 780 home community, single family homes and townhomes called Mill Creek Town in Durwood or Rockville, Maryland, depending upon who you ask. It's a 58-year-old community, and we have several original owners still there, and many who have been there 30 to 40 years. I'd say that at least 20% of the homes are now occupied by folks who meet this description. Our village is proudly celebrating its 10th anniversary of community service and remains an all volunteer operated organization. Our bylaws state that all adult residents 18 years and older are considered members. However, the services we provide had to be at no cost to recipients. And we have stuck by that pledge. As a small village, we have persevered within years of financial constraints, fulfilled our commitments measurably to the community, and evolved favorably as an organization because of dedicated and collegial volunteers, supportive neighbors who value what we do, to build a caring community, and collaborations with like-minded organizations like the Senior Connection, which assists us from the outset to handle scheduling, do our training needs, both for driving and home visits, and helps us with the background check costs. Over time, we have figured out how to tell our story effectively to others and expanded our base of support. We have not forced our growth and allowed ourselves to develop organically, although we do reach out beyond our own subdivision to other Durwood residents. We learned that early on that building it did not ensure that they will come, despite the famous line from the movie Field of Dreams. In 2022, our 22 to 25 volunteers, depending upon which day you're counting, delivered nearly 1,600 hours of service of drivers, friendly visitors, check-in callers, grocery shoppers, meal preparers, social event hosts, and board members. These hours translated to about 130 round-trip rides, almost 190 friendly visits and calls, 40 trips to the grocery, and nearly as many meals. We host 7 annual community-wide intergenerational events that drew 435 participants in 2022. Volunteers created and administer our website. Volunteers publish a twice monthly e-newsletter. Volunteers moderate our Facebook page. Volunteers fundraise. Volunteers deliver events door to door for every event. Volunteers participate in the welcome wagon for new neighbors, and serve on occasion as the homeowners association, at least informally and informationally, after a 20-year absence of the real one. Our budget in cash and outlays and expenses underwritten by in-kind contributions approximates about $5,000. We meet the expense via donations, small grants, and business sponsorships. We instituted an e-appeal, couldn't afford mail, to our neighbors, and I guess built enough goodwill to get a decent response. So we're building the reserves that Abby describes as so critical to sustaining an organization that is small and trying to thrive. For many years, we operated without liability, going back to Abby, the lawyer's point of view. And as a nonprofit exec, I worried about it too. And we held our collective breaths for many years. But with the support of the Rockville area Villages Exchange that helped subsidize it, we actually got insurance for the first time last year. Now our role is to ensure we can meet this expense going forward. We know we have to step up our fundraising efforts, building on the successes we've had in, as I suggested, the goodwill that we built in our community among both residents and business neighbors. Our board does not intend to pursue member dues anytime soon. In fact, the 2019 resident service survey upheld the no cost to members concept and the desire for continued support of our organization through charitable donation. As far as specific challenges, as probably all of us have, excuse me, volunteer recruitment. And what we do is we have at every event a place where you can suggest your interest, even if it's a future interest, not immediate, in volunteering, because we'll bug you about it over time. We have we regularly count how many times you've participated. We figure if they come back for more, they may be interested enough to lead. So we maintain an ongoing volunteer prospect list. Leadership succession. I'm the 5th president. One lasted 2 years, 3 lasted 1 year, and I'm in my 5th year. So, and we're celebrating our 10th anniversary. So we have some consistency now, and we built our board from what was about 5 folks to 11. So we're trying to cultivate those others on the board to take over executive committee roles, and hopefully we'll be successful. Maintaining and growing our funding base to ensure that we can continue to operate during the hard times, such as during COVID and those times when we didn't have business or didn't have things to do and needed to maintain volunteers and spirit. Advancing our organizational development is a challenge. We have developed policies and procedures, job descriptions. We created our own digitized archive. We have amazing volunteers, and if we had to pay for it, it would have been a lot of money. We created a well-received brochure, an infographic handout that's great collateral material when you're marketing yourself, and many other things. But we may have to, over time, evolve further in increasing our, as Abby suggested, our digital and virtual world connections, because we still have spreadsheets on Excel and depend on those things. We have of our 700 plus homes, probably emails for 550 of them, and they're regular newsletter getters and announcements. Attracting more engagement. I would say that I know probably of at least 20 different individuals who could use our help, but don't ask. They're defiant in their independence, and we want to maintain their independence, you know, help them maintain their independence, but they're defiant about it. And they have maybe children relatively close, but aren't there regularly. And we ask anytime, you know, we can't push it. They have to ask us. But if we can get more engagement from those, I think that we would be happy to serve them. Although they don't just come, they have to arrive there themselves in terms of that decision. I would say that we fully respect that we are in no rush to grow, to scale up. And frankly, sometimes when we attend these WAVE conferences, we say, oh my God, look what they're doing. And we come back and talk about it as the board saying, hold on. They like us out there. They appreciate what we do. And we don't have to be in any rush to do more than we're capable of doing within our financial constraints and our volunteer capacity. So we don't. So I would say, in closing, small is good. With the right people, it can be very manageable. Thanks.
Well, thank you for that presentation, which and for the encouraging, optimistic word at the end, which I think all 3 of the speakers would agree with. Okay, we're going to move on to questions now. And again, you can raise your hands going down to reactions at the bottom of your screen. And maybe Carolyn, if you would help me monitor the chat. I see Patricia Clark's hand is up. So Pat, do you want to go first? You have to,
Yes. I want to very briefly mention we have similar attributes as these ones. We call it volunteer managed instead of all volunteer because we have applied for grants, and it becomes kind of an oxymoron if you say we want money and we're all volunteers. So we call it volunteer managed. One of 3 in DC. We don't charge for anything. We don't have an office. We don't have an executive director. And we're in our 14th year. But some of the issues that I'll just throw out that we've run into is that we're not taken as seriously as the villages that have paid executive directors. We often get questions like, well, don't you want to be like Capitol? No, Capitol Hill doesn't ask this, but other people too. Are you going to grow up to be like Capitol Hill, which is a wonderful, lovely, big village with lots of services? And we, like somebody else said, they're not trying to grow too much. We're adapting to things as they come along. But anyway, so that's one, we don't get taken so seriously. When there are reimbursement grants, we can't get reimbursed for our volunteer time. So those of us that are managing it, if we were an executive director being paid, we could get reimbursed for that. But since we're volunteers, we can't get, some of the funds that would otherwise be available. We have grown lately because of DC grants that have come along. So we're hiring part-time people to be webmaster events people and stuff like that. And I can't remember the name of it, but there's the federal government has a fundraising every year for
The combined federal campaign.
yes.
Yeah.
And we did have that designation for a while, but because everything's volunteer, most of our money was going towards our administration, our insurance and stuff. So anyway, we figured out a way, I guess, at that time to explain it. But anyway, those are some of the challenges that we faced being a relatively small and volunteer managed village.
And you are Palisades in DC, just.
No,
for
Glover
people-
Park.
Oh,
Glover
Glover Park.
Park.
I don't know why I keep, right, exactly. Glover Park in DC. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Other questions from anyone in? Anyone in the chat? Oh, come on. You guys must be wondering how they do this. Right?
Well,
Okay,
I'll just jump in and,
Go ahead. Was that you, George?
yeah,
Oh, yes.
I'll just jump in and say, we really do run on a shoestring. We don't purchase insurance. We're not there yet. And we feel confident enough in the limited liability protections that are available to continue without purchasing insurance. So yeah, that does allow us to continue on a budget of our fixed expenses are basically $100 a year. Okay. We do receive a fair amount of contributions since we started in 2015. I guess we've received about $5,000 in contributions, most of those being unsolicited checks by neighbors. We've had a couple of grants that we've received from Suburban Hospital, from their Hospital Village Alliance, and we've had a few unsolicited grant money awards come in after we distributed some brochures about the organization. Yeah, we haven't had any sort of comments about why can't we be more of an organization. We have found that the neighbors really appreciate what we do, and if we have to do anything, is we have to spread the word that we're here and we're still here. And yeah, so.
Good. Okay, Jean, you had a question for someone?
Yeah, thank you. Make sure I'm not on mute. Yes. First of all, I had to say, Abby, when you make the comment about how you have this non-paying, very, very demanding part-time job, I very much identify with that, and I'm sure many others on the call do as well. I'm from North Bethesda Village. We are an all-volunteer model, but probably could count, well, maybe not on my 10 fingers, but I could probably count between my fingers and toes are real engaged volunteers. It's definitely a relatively small group, and so every one of our board members is very much an active part of making the village successful. One thing that I think I heard in all three of the presentations, and North Bethesda Village is very different, is that you are a fairly self-constrained neighborhood, a development, or a fairly, Abby, I think you said you have about, I forget, 900 or whatever homes in your community.
2,000.
Sorry. So we're North Bethesda Village, we're covering the entire zip code, which is likely 100,000 or more. We focus on seniors. At least I will not be on call about the intergenerational stuff, because we can't do that. We can, anyway, I'm not sure that what my question is. Perhaps, well, I guess my question is, with an all-volunteer model, in order to get grants, in order to get support from the suburban grants, county grants, et cetera, you have to have people writing grants. And that's another significant time commitment. And then, of course, you have to manage those grants, which I know the county, particularly with the county grants, which are contracts, is fairly onerous sometimes. In order to do that, does one need an executive director or somebody who's being paid to do that? It's sort of a chicken and egg kind of situation. You can't get money until you have somebody to help you get that money. How do you find the volunteers or the time to get the financial support that you need?
Well, I'll answer from our perspective. We're far smaller, far smaller. And you're right, we are a confined area, though we do reach out to other subdivisions as needed. But that's, it goes back to my comment about, I don't know how the larger ones do it. Because as you have a bigger catchment area and have more services to provide, inevitably you have to depend on getting hired help to be able to manage it. You have to really invest to make it work. And I have been a proponent of, and have talked about this to others, you know, and those bigger ones, maybe you should unbundle it and make it more, you know, manageable and palatable for people to be able to volunteer, save expense that way. In terms of grants, you're looking at the grant writer, but not for the contracts of the county, because they're a challenge for us.
Right.
We've gotten other grants from small family foundations and indirectly through events grants, etc. But really, it's building respect from your community for us and the business partners we have. You know, whether they be real estate realtors or the cleaners or the barber shop, or has really helped us a great deal, though our budgets are far smaller than what you must have, Dean. It keeps us going. It keeps us going. And hopefully we can maintain that relationship and grow the relationship as we kind of slowly and carefully and organically expand our service area.
We've had a couple of questions to talk about volunteer coordination and vetting. Again, you have limited resources. Do you have enough resources that you have a designated volunteer coordinator? And who does the vetting?
So speaking for Wingate Maplewood, we have, I believe now 6 volunteer coordinators being individuals who receive the requests for assistance and relay the request to our volunteers and coordinate that whole process. We have these 6 volunteer coordinators, and we rotate that responsibility on a monthly basis. So yeah, again, the scale of our operations is not so great that becomes overwhelming. This month, it's, you know, we've had maybe 16 requests for assistance, and you know, that's actually a little bit more than we've had because we're coming out of the pandemic. But it's quite manageable. We do have software primarily from Google and from the Lots of Helping Hands organization that's available to us free, that's made the coordination pretty streamlined. The handout describes how that works and provides some of the details. But that's how we do the volunteer coordination. And in terms of screening, if you will, volunteers, those volunteers who would provide assistance, we don't screen them early on. We would have a volunteer orientation, and we would meet people to begin with and get a feel for them. We haven't encountered any situation where we were uncomfortable with the volunteers. That said, we don't screen people who ask for assistance either. We don't know. We can't guarantee that volunteers are going to be happy with the people that they serve. So the whole background check, we have just sidestepped that. We certainly have agreements that we require volunteers to sign with respect to confidentiality and not taking advantage of situations and so on and so forth. But that's about as far as we go.
I can answer the question in the chat. First of all, I can understand, George, why you may not feel obligated to background check because you don't have insurance, correct?
That's correct.
Carry insurance. So if you carry insurance, you really need to background check, because if there's an issue, they could potentially say, you know what insurance companies are like. And we have, someone asked about the Village Rides process. They really walk you through everything, and they provide, if you're getting background checks through, I think it's Coasis or something like that, you can, if it's to be your driver, Village Rides will reimburse you for the cost of that background check. If it's not for a driver and it's just for a criminal background check, I think the most recent one I saw, I think it was $29.95 to do it. And we have an email where we send the information about how to background check. Very easy. I mean, it's a very easy submission. And we suggest, they can either pay for it themselves, and most volunteers do, or they say they want NCCC to pay for it, and we will pay for it. In terms of the process itself, the training on the software is done by Village Rides. They do it, they will accommodate you directly, however whenever it works best for your drivers. We actually have a brand new administrator starting shortly, and she will be trained on the whole program. The way we have it set up, they had talked about doing email requests, but it didn't work out. So it's a call to the administrator's number, whichever number that person chooses to do. The most recent ones have used their own landlines. The new one is planning to use her cell phone. You get a phone call, you have to do the intake. There are specific questions that we've laid out so that we know if there are any mobility issues or any special accommodations that need to be made, if there are any concerns. And then the administrator will put the ride on the software program. It goes out to all of the vetted volunteer drivers, and they either accept or not. And there's no obligation to accept. You can be a volunteer driver, and some take one ride a year. Others take every ride that comes through. So it's really very, it depends upon the person, but the system is seamless. I mean, and then you get notices. You get a red notice. If someone has not taken the ride within a couple of days, there's a red notice. The administrator will sometimes make some phone calls to see, could you take this ride? But generally, we've been able to cover the rides. But again, as I think either George or Joe said, we don't guarantee. And it's not it's not a taxi service. I mean, you can't call, I'm at the mall, can you come and pick me up? No, we have to know like enough time in advance so that people can look at their schedules and decide whether or not to do it. We currently don't have a volunteer coordinator right now, but I'm looking to fill that position. And our volunteers are incredibly self-starters. Thank God. You know, I view my role, even though, you know, I'm basically the executive director as well as the president, I view the NCCC as like an umbrella organization. We're here to facilitate what the neighbors want to do. And I was at a kids and family pumpkin carving event, and a couple of the young women came to me and said, we'd really, you know, we're artists. We'd love to get in touch with the artists in the neighborhood. Maybe we can do an artist walk. And so we sent out, we've got the communication infrastructure. So we send out the information to everyone, and they held their first organizational meeting, and they're scheduling events. I don't want to micromanage. I don't have the time. It's not my interest. I was a manager for many years, and I fully believe in empowering the people who you are working with. So, we also see ourselves, unfortunately, we may have to grow because we have hundreds of new neighbors coming in those high rises where Bozzuto is building on Chevy Chase Lake Supermarket. So what we're going to do is we're set up with zones. And this is something people might consider. It's not original to us. We got it from Bannockburn. Miriam Kelty, may she rest in peace, was incredible. And that's how she set up her village, which is basically there are zone leaders. And we've created 8 zones right now within our neighborhood. And those zone leaders will hold coffees and wine and cheese and maybe a dog get together or a potluck dinner. And we just provide the communication, the financial support, everybody has their, you know, what does Pazit say? If you've seen one village, you've seen one village. So you take from it what you can. Small is good. You know, it's working for us, and it sounds like it's working for the other villages here too. So I'm open to other questions as well.
I'm noticing that there was a question in the chat that says, could each of you talk about any support, if any, that you have received from local government? And what was involved, Joe?
Well, we really haven't gotten a lot of financial support. Obviously, we do engage with the other Montgomery County villages in discussions and learn from them. And Pazit's been great in sharing information that we find useful and share with our community. But it hasn't been there. And frankly, you know, when I come back from some of the WAVE meetings and we hear, I don't know which, I forget which area in Virginia offered $15,000 to each of the villages, and we hear the amount of money being given to the DC ones by their government, we get jealous. We get jealous, like, you know, there should be a means by which, and we're trying to identify more monies that would help the villages here. But I would have to say we get very little in terms of financial support from county government.
I would say that when we started, as I said earlier, Pazit was incredibly supportive, and it was, what I didn't mention is about 2 years in, unbeknownst to us, one of the women who was active in organizing the village had a family foundation. And she got in touch with us, and I think I cried. I absolutely cried when she called and she said that year's interest from the foundation was going to be given in toto to us, and it was $5,000. And I said, oh my God, we will not fall apart. We will be sustainable because we have this money now. And she actually came through a couple of additional years, and we said at that point, look, you know, we're okay. You can give it to someone else. We may need that money if we have to hire someone, but for right now, we're okay. So, you know, that's where we are right now.
Can I amend my remark before George? I did mention the Rockville Area Village Exchange, and they're helping us identify funds for insurance. And I believe their funds that they're sharing with us were county government grants. So indirectly, we have received some support, but directly, no. Thank you.
Yeah, we haven't, I don't think we've applied for any grants from the county. I know some of them are based on the income levels of the local population. And, you know, we certainly don't have that kind of need where we are. Again, most of our grants, had several of them from the Suburban Hospital Village Alliance that, you know, recognizes that health-related care and assistance that villages can give are not income dependent. Yeah.
Let's see, is that you, Leo? Raising your hand?
I was, and I had a question for Joseph,
Sure.
because he said something that really spoke to me, and that was, he explained that folks that could use the help from the village didn't ask. And I was wondering, how do you deal with that frustration? Because to me, it seems to be frustrating. But you're right, you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make him drink, right? And then a second part of that question is, what was the ticket to get the intergenerational? For those of you that have the intergenerational aspect, I heard you talk about having some kind of a family festival or something. What was that? What really drew that intergenerational aspect in? And I will mute myself now to get the response.
Well, okay. In terms of those people who haven't asked for help but could, we maintain a relationship with them. We probably periodically, we do periodically contact them and visit with them to check in and see if there's any need for us. And oftentimes, they won't admit to it, but we can still tell from the fact that they're hoarding, you know, they're you know, feeling social isolation, that we need to maintain these visits if they take nothing else from us. So we do keep an eye on them routinely. I'd say that in the past year, maybe 3 of those 20 have come forward, and 2 of the ones we were serving passed away. So, I mean, that's life. In terms of intergenerational, interestingly, and Miriam Kelty was part of advising us when we were founded. We started as intergenerational. Remember, 18 and above is our membership, even though it's kind of a pseudo membership because we don't ask dues. But it's always been that. And in fact, at the beginning, the folks who were older and wanted to help each other as neighbors decided one of the things they could also do is serve as block grandmothers and let the younger parents go out to shop and do things while, you know, they looked after the kids on the street, you know, or invited them to their homes for the hour they needed to go shopping or for an appointment, etc. Now, before I took over as president, that had already kind of faded, but we're revisiting that as a possibility, where, because it's a gift that keeps on giving. You're helping someone else, you're getting help and feeling the gift of helping someone. So that's something we're looking into too. The big ones for intergenerational are game night, our ice cream social, our picnic, you know, the wine and cheese party, although it's not intergenerational at the kids level, although the picnic and ice cream social are replete with kids. But so that's how you do it. You know, you kind of, and we go door to door, and many of those doors are young families that are, and we have turnover. I think in the last year, when we saw almost 60 houses turnover. So we're seeing new families, new faces, lots of diversity. And we're finding neighbors that can speak to them if there are cultural differences and language differences, et cetera. So we're trying our best to reach out to those people, and because you need young blood. And and we have the motto we share that, it's all about paying it forward. And you got to have somebody behind you paying it forward to you, like you're doing it for the next generation.
Well, thank
I mean,
you.
I know we're going to be doing a multi-generational talk, so I'm not going to focus too much on that, other than the motivation of why we decided to go multi-generational is that every neighbor needs help. The young families are just as stressed out or more and have different needs, but the seniors and the young family, everybody in the neighborhood could use neighbors helping neighbors. And we didn't see a reason to limit ourselves just to seniors. So that's the motivation. And I think at that session, we'll go into greater detail about multi-generational opportunities. And in terms of services, this is not unique to the few villages that are here, the number of villages that are here. All villages have the same problem. People don't want to ask for help. They just don't. I mean, it's an admission of weakness or inability to do things for themselves. But once they do, it is amazing how grateful they are and how they spread the word that, this is such a wonderful service. Rather than get picked up by an Uber, you develop, and what's happened is you develop a relationship. So the same driver generally will take the same member to multiple times and they become friends, so which is the whole point of this. So, and we also don't have tons of rides, but it goes in shifts, and it is unfortunate. Generally, if someone reaches the point, what I see is that having the village and assisting seniors to age in place, when seniors get to the point that they need this kind of help, and usually they're able to do it for a couple of years. And then they're going to need to hire their own help, because the kind of assistance they need generally tends to be more than we can offer. Or they move to be near their families, or they move into an assisted living place. So some of our biggest users of our services aren't available anymore to use our services. So, but I think it's a cycle, and there will always be someone who will need us.
Well, I want to thank all of you for your presentations, and I want to thank the audience for the good questions. I want to say one of the things that I heard almost all of our speakers talk about is the issue of leadership succession, which of course touches every village, almost every village. And when we have surveyed people to say, what are your pain points? Why, that's a top pain point for everyone. And I will be trying to put together a Zoom session similar to this, or possibly it might be featured at one of our big quarterly meetings, because we know that it's a big issue for everyone. You have to, maybe that's a good thing about the multi or intergenerational villages, is that I'm going to use a politically incorrect term. You can groom your successors, right? So anyway, so thank you very much. We will be posting this and with George's very detailed information, so you can look for that perhaps next week. And again, I remind you that on the 19th of April, we hope you will come back for the multi-generational discussion and to learn who won the Founders Awards. Okay. Hope to see you then.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. That's the
Thank
wave
you,
wave.
Joe.
Okay. Now this is the wave. Okay.
Bye, everybody.
That's great.
Bye.